Hello, hello. So now you've probably started finding sources or scholarly articles, and you'll notice as you read them, they seem to follow this format together. This format is probably Imrd. So in this video, we're going to look at Imrd and its structure so we can become better readers and know what to expect, as well as better writers, because our project 4 is going to be in this format. To explain, Imrd format is a common structure for most journal publications. If you want to publish, you're probably going to have to conform to this format. If that's the case, if everyone has to do this format, it means that there's more standardization. And if there's more standardization, we have better credibility and reliability with research. Remember, we want to be ethical researchers. So with the way the format is, the reader can see exactly what's going on and has a lot more transparent look at the data. It also allows for replication. So if I read an article and I'm disagreeing with it, or I'm like, I don't quite believe that, or if I'm like, I wonder if that would work but with this group. The way Imrd works means I can take the information from the paper, I have enough of that information to replicate the study myself and get my own version of data. Lastly, because Imrd has specific structure and specific sections, it's much easier to read and write. You know exactly what goes where. So let's dive in. Imrd is actually an acronym for the different parts of it. So I stands for introduction, and this also includes the lit review. So the introduction starts with your motivation for the topic. You would specify why you're qualified and what inspired this, or what experience led to this research question. After that, you would have there would be a synthesis of sources, or what others have said about the topic. Very secondary source focused. Specifically, you would want, or there would be sources that justify the research question and plan. It really shows the 3 C's, why we need this research to be done. It also lays out a framework or theoretical framework. Essentially, this would be the foundational theories or information of that field that the reader really needs to know in order to understand the piece. Lastly, the introduction ends by explicitly stating the research questions. When I say explicitly, I do mean quite explicitly. It's very typical that the end of the section says research question and then drops it in. It makes it very clear to the reader as they read that section, okay, here's why we're doing this research, why it's justified, why I should be invested in it, and what the focus is. After introduction is the M, or methods. This section explains the process that the author used to answer their research question, typically field research. The 3 parts of methods would be the materials, participants, and procedure. Materials would be what you use, such as like special equipment, the interview questions, or maybe the survey you used, that kind of material. Participants would be describing the demographics of who took your survey or who you recruited for the interview, such as you were looking for parents of children failing math, or if you look at your survey and you saw that it was 70% women took it. Next would be the procedure, which is the actual steps you took to carry out the research. So step 1, distribute this. Step 2, do this. This is very important for something like an experiment, but also still relevant with an interview, especially because we're doing online interviews. By having a methods section, the author has really created a sense of validity and credibility. They're showing the reader exactly what they did. They're hiding nothing in their methodology. It also, again, helps with the replication. I can look at the methods and say, okay, I'll follow these exact same steps, use the exact same materials. So that's I and M, leaving R and D in Imrd, results and discussion. These sections are sometimes combined because they're so connected to each other, but it's an important skill to be able to separate them. For results, it's the actual raw data that you collected from field research. So this could be a table, charts, statistics, actual quotes from the interview, all set up for the reader to see. The reason we have this section where it's just the data is so the reader can make their own interpretations and analysis before yours. Readers like to really see things untouched before you work with them. After you present the data, you can move to discussion, which is your interpretation and analysis. So you look back at that data and you say, okay, here's the impact of it, what it means. You might also connect it to the lit review saying, oh, it challenges this author or it supports this theory. You're really bringing the data into the discussion of what everyone else is talking about. Within discussion is a conclusion. In this section, you would finally, ultimately answer your research question. You take everything you analyze and you say, okay, here's the answer. Also in this section is the limitations. So you would discuss maybe errors in the process, biases in the methodology, or just mistakes and concerns you have about the study. You might also talk about application of findings. This is common with like recommending a program or teaching strategy or some sort of policy change. If you don't do an application, it's also appropriate to talk about future plans. So maybe after the study, you realize there's still a lot left to do. So you tell the reader you might do future research or future research is needed. So that makes Imrd, Introduction, Methods, Results, Discussion, a lot easier, right? Here are some other features that are just part of academic papers, but they're not part of the acronym. We don't want the acronym to get too long. There's titles, which typically use colons, and they're very like unfun or straightforward. The reason being that academics and scholars, they like to get straight to the point. So check out the titles or make sure your title is very straight to the point. Imrads typically have abstracts, which are short summaries. They're used for databases or applications, stuff like that. All papers have a bibliography or works cited, and then most papers have an appendix, which is kind of like if you turn in a paper and then you also turn in a folder of all the materials you used. So like, here's my paper, but also here's my interview, like a list of interview questions, the signed consent forms, the survey itself, or maybe photocopies of images you used. You'd all put that in the appendix. Again, the reason we're covering Imrad now is that we want to read more efficiently. Once you see the sections, you can kind of see like there's some you can skip or some that are better than others. So what I'd recommend is starting with the abstract of the paper. Read that summary and see how important it is for you. If the article looks good, I would recommend skipping methods and results. And if you feel like reading the lit review, you probably can just skim it. Because really the value of the lit review for you as a reader is to find other sources for yourself or for you to cite. But I would focus mostly on discussion conclusion, because the value of discussion is it gives you the actual analysis you can use to justify your research question or justify this topic, the topic's importance. Also, of conclusion, you get a lot of ideas and inspiration from it, especially if they're giving recommendations or if they say like, here's some future research that can be done. You can always say, hey, I did that future research. So I know we're just starting with Imrad, and it might be unfamiliar with you, but as you read your sources, your articles, try and see if they're fitting this format and if they're matching these parts.